Welcome to the Reaching Up Podcast. I'm Ron Farris.
And I'm Daniel Locke.
And this episode, we are talking about honesty.
Yes, we are.
Honesty, a conversation that a lot of people do not like to have.
Yeah.
Is that because everybody wants to be dishonest, you think? Or why is that?
I think it's uncomfortable for us to possibly realize that we're not as honest as we wish we were.
Well, it doesn't take long to notice it when you think about it. So what is honesty? Honesty is adherence to the truth or the facts as we understand them, or fairness and straightforwardness of conduct. So is there such a thing as an honest politician? You know, we judge that not by what they say, but what they do. Yeah. Honesty or truthfulness is a facet of moral character. When we talk about having integrity, that one element in that is the level of honesty that we have. The way I would say it is this: if you want to be known as a trustworthy person, you have to be honest. Mm-hmm. If you want to be known as a person of integrity, you have to be honest. Mm-hmm. If you want to be a person who is not called a hypocrite, then you have to be honest. It's pretty basic. Mm-hmm. And live a life that honestly reflects the things that you say that you believe. Yeah. So honesty and accountability are crucial elements of living. Mm-hmm. In the addiction community, honesty is essential for what we call recovery. And without being honest with ourselves and with other people, it is essentially impossible to beat addiction. But it's not just limited to people who are dealing with addiction. Honesty is one of those things that a lot of people struggle with.
Mm-hmm. And it may not be as much as just straight up lying to somebody's face, because some people will do that. I have done that, but it can be as much as not true. And I think all those are correct. And I'd add to that, it can also be the breeding grounds for resentment, which is kind of what we talked about a few weeks ago.
That's right.
And it's if you're not honest about the discussion that comes to mind is if when I ask my wife or a friend, hey, where you want to go eat? And they're like, I don't care. And then you recommend a place and they're like, I don't want to go there. I was like, all right, where do you want to go? I don't anywhere you want to go. Mm-hmm. And then you recommend another place and like, I don't really want to go there. Like, well, you have to tell me because I'm about to get angry or resentful because you won't choose something. So all those encompass.
Absolutely. And then I heard this week a conversation with a guy who said that he did exactly that. He asked his wife about going out to eat. She said she didn't care. He said, all right, well, let's go to this restaurant. And they went to that restaurant. And then after the fact, they're in a visit with another couple. And she talks about how much she does not like this particular restaurant that they just went to. Yeah. And it's like, why didn't you tell me that? We wouldn't have gone, and now then there is, in fact, a resentment that they've got to deal with and probably some difficulty in, managing that.
I'll say I've been on the other side of that where I'm like, well, I think they want to go, so we'll go. And maybe the same time, the other person's like, well, I don't want to go there either, but we'll go because this person wants to go.
Well, then maybe we could call that an honest mistake.
Yeah.
You're not, when I think about being dishonest, I think about dishonesty as basically an intentional effort to not be truthful. Mm-hmm. That examples of that would be lying. Mm-hmm. Lying is dishonesty. That's what that is. Cheating. I'm going to, I know that I should give you, 8 hours a day. But today I'm really just not into it. I'm gonna give you 6, and let you pay me for 8, and I'll make it up down the line. That's cheating. Shouldn't do that. That's stealing as well. Theft, but outright theft, obviously is dishonesty. And that can be very simple. It can be a very small thing, like you go to the coffee shop, you give them a 20, they give you $2 back more than they should have. You walk away with your $2 and say, "Oh man, I won today." That is dishonesty. That's theft, and there's no way to make it right. It's absolutely a dishonest act, and you are not being honest if you do those things. Now, interestingly, there are a couple of aspects to honesty that I think we should talk about. One is honesty with other people. Obviously, if I'm in a relationship with you, as in our case, we have a friendship that's been going on a while. You have the right to expect honesty from me. We call that trust. And if I am ever dishonest with you and I get caught, then I shouldn't be surprised if that breach of trust affects our relationship. It can very well end a relationship, because trust is something that is perfect until it's broken, and then it's never the same. Rebuilding trust is probably one of the hardest things that human beings can do in a relationship, from my experience. But that's honesty with other people. But then there's also honesty with ourselves. Can you think of any examples where honesty with yourself can, or dishonesty with your own self can cause you harm? We talked about denial a while back.
I think that's what it's very related to
denial is. Yeah.
And so I think, yes. And so it's always funny. Everything we talk about when we talk about in the podcast, we've always, somehow it comes up in our Tuesday Bible study with our college class. And so this was one of them, is like, can you have an accurate view of yourself like that? Because we're going through James 5, and part of it was talking about being prideful and taking advantage of people. And so it's like, do you have an accurate view of yourself in view of a holy God, not in view of other fallible people? Like, I'm not looking at other people saying, well, I'm not, and this is
everybody's doing it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, trying to stop doing that, because I have done that. And it's like, well, I'm not as bad as this person, or mine isn't that bad because look at this person. Instead of just saying, hey, I do struggle in this area. I'm not perfect in this area. I know my limitations, and I don't want to say that I have limitations, but being honest with myself that, hey, you have a limitation or a blind spot. So you need to be around people who can point them out. You need to be around people, not in a condescending way, but in like, hey man, I see you're doing this, and like, I know you don't mean this, but here's how it could be interpreted. Or just honesty with, and it can be a spouse, a close friend, either one of those. And if we're able to be honest with ourselves, we can actually ask for someone to give us an opinion. And we say asking for help, and that's all it is, just a different opinion that can help us be better.
In my relationships nowadays, I don't want to be friends with somebody who is just constantly, trying to live like life isn't hard. And that and act as if they're perfect, or act and put me in a position of thinking, I need to try to be perfect because they're perfect, and they're going to think less of me if they know that I have these flaws. I don't have time for that anymore. Nowadays, I pretty much open up in relationships pretty quick, and I talk about my flaws. I'm grateful to God that He has delivered me from, a good number of them, and so I give Him glory for that. But at the same time, I'm very open about the fact that, I have struggles, and that, I have had to work really hard to learn how to be honest with myself about that, and to, in order to live a more healthy life, I keep people in my life constantly that I know I can trust them to tell me the truth. If there's something that I'm doing that's not right, or that seems off, or should be questioned, to me it's a sign of love and respect in a relationship if my friend calls me out. I appreciate that. Same thing would be true with a spouse. I think one of the best things a spouse can do is learn how to lovingly, tactfully, mirror to me the things that I seem to be in denial about, if you will. That is an important part, but obviously it's not something that you just launch into without some thought about how to do it. There's a right way, a wrong way, basically, with everything. But when it comes to honesty, I'll talk about just a second about addiction, because I work a lot with people who are in addiction. The first step in the 12-step programs, you hear about 12-step programs, the first step is to admit that we were powerless over whatever it is. It can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be sex, it can be gambling, it can be any number of things that we become addicted to. But we have to admit that we were powerless over that thing. That first step, you'll hear if you go to recovery meetings is the only one that we say or they say that you have to work 100%. And that is where the honesty with yourself really comes into view. It's impossible for me to start the process of recovering or finding a solution to the problem that I am dealing with if I can't admit that it's a problem.
Yeah. I think the funny example I get of this is like if you're driving your car, it was a joke a while back. It's like, man, I hear a new noise in my car. I guess I'm just going to turn up the radio because I don't have enough money to fix it. And so it's the same thing for us. You wouldn't like if your car's making terrible noises and sputtering and like you see smoke come out the back and then it gets better for a minute. And then you see smoke coming out the back. I'm not going to just keep on rolling. Okay, we're good.
That just happened to me recently.
Yeah, I know.
That's a trigger for me. Don't talk about that. Yeah,
but we would never do it
billowing smoke in the middle of traffic, 6 o'clock in the evening.
I forgot about that. I'm sorry.
It cost me $3,000 to get that fixed. But anyway.
So you'd never do that with your cars, but we're perfectly fine doing that with ourselves. Saying, no, we're good. It's okay. It's only every now and then. It's like, well, what if we just talk about it and fix it?
Yeah.
What if we talk about how it's not okay to run through life with a flat tire?
Exactly. And again, just sort of sticking with the addiction community for a second, I meet a lot of people in the addiction community who have been telling a lot of lies. And you see this repeatedly. A lot of people who walk into the room of recovery to try to deal with an addiction that has gotten to the point to where they cannot deny it any longer is because they have spun this web of lies around the addiction because they absolutely did not, addiction and any kind of just dishonest behavior is going to bring you into conflict with the people around you. It's inevitably. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how bad it is. And a lot of times that is because people who are living in denial, and I'm going to say in this context addiction, they will tell a lie to cover up the fact that they don't want it known. And then they have to tell another lie to cover that lie up. And then they have to keep another lie, and then the lie has to keep going. And examples of this are like, a lot of people who are going to work under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or the influence of last night's drugs and alcohol abuse. Will say well I'm sorry I was late this morning, the traffic was bad, or they're being dishonest about what's happening. The reason is because I incapacitated myself yesterday, and I can't function today. But that's the last thing they're going to say. They're going to tell lies, and and at some point when you've heard that the traffic is a problem for the 10th time, the boss is going to say, well, there's what's really going on here. But the point is that the lies at some point, either it becomes so arduous that we just hate the life we're living because we're living a lie, or we get caught. And it's just undeniable that we've been caught in a lie. And at that point, your credibility tanks. You're no longer going to be the same person in this person's eyes. And that is the price, one of the prices of dishonesty. But in the context of addiction, it is impossible to get someone to face the need for recovery until they face the fact that they are being dishonest with themselves about the way that they're living being destructive. And a lot of times I've heard it said in those circles that, a lot of people don't begin truly seeking recovery until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of making a change. And that's what forces a lot of people to be honest. There's an old saying in AA, I've heard it many times, that, when a new person comes in today, it's either their liver, their lover, or their lawyer. But whatever it is that brings them in, the idea is if when you walk into that situation, it's time to get honest because, the party's over. It's time to be honest about a problem. It's time to be honest about the need for change. It's time to face up to it and take action or suffer perhaps the severe consequences of not doing so.
Yeah. And I wonder if that even goes along with, because I've heard it and it's in a similar way, it's like lies kill intimacy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And so when I say that, it's like not just like I don't know, we hear the word intimacy, I always would associate with like, I don't know, maybe something sexual or something like that, but like just the intimacy we have as friends, like my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my other friends. Like
That's right.
I like this this line, being truthful allows for genuine connection and vulnerability, because I think lies kill connection. And they really form like a deeper the connection I'm talking about. If I'm talking to you, Ron, and we're in church and I ask you how you're doing this week, and you tell me, man, I'm doing good, I had a great week, like I feel zero connection to you. Zero. Like I don't feel like we've actually gotten to know each other. I don't feel like I've actually heard about your week. But if we're sitting down for coffee like we did, I'm like, hey Ron, how was your week? And you like tell me, like, hey, it was kind of rough this week. I had this happen and that was not fun. And I had this happen and like I want to do a better job of that. And I'm not doing as good a job with that. And so I need encouragement in that area. And then you just walk me through what's going on. And I think that's true with anybody. Then I feel a connection. Like if you get, and I think that what sets apart good speakers, maybe even a good preacher, is someone who doesn't come at it of on a pedestal saying, well, you should be here and like I'm better than you. And without saying that, like it's just they assume that they are doing all the right things, or they assume that because their lies are pretty believable that they're doing okay. And I think it's in that vulnerability. And the personal example of this is just being so my wife for the longest time thought I was not an anxious person. And so as I confronted and as I was dealing with a few things, and as we talked through it, I talked through it with a counselor and other friends, is like I realized, yes, there's quite a bit of anxiety that was driving some behaviors that weren't healthy. And so once I was able to put words to it and say, yeah, I am actually very anxious. And it wasn't like your normal things, like work was going well. I wasn't anxious for work, but there were dynamics at work that either I had not set good boundaries with or something. And so it was driving some anxiety there. And so for the longest time, Taylor was like, you're just not an anxious person. I am. I just don't understand it. And I thought I was coming across as strength, saying, hey, I don't struggle with this. I'm going to be stoic and it's going to be fine. And what I found is when I opened up and said, hey, I've realized that these behaviors were stemming from this, and I was very anxious for this. And now when I go home, I'm like, she asked me how my day was, and I tell her, I'm like, yeah, and this happened. I'm a little anxious about this situation, but it's okay. I plan to do this in response to that. I had a good workout today, and that helped a little bit. Like when I have a plan around it and not just willy-nilly saying, hey, I'm feeling this way and I hope it gets better, but having a plan for like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, steps of it. It's grown our intimacy. Like she knows me better now. And so we know each other better now. So when I open up, she's able to open up as well. And so it's a two-way street. So once you open up, and you have to be careful, because I think there are those times that some people are just waiting for you to open up and be like, there's a weakness, I'm going to exploit it. And so I think there's some care taken on who you're going to be vulnerable with, I guess is the word there.
True. Yeah, I can remember several times in our conversations over coffee where, I would come into a conversation and say, look, I don't mean to be negative, but I'm really struggling today. And then 9 times out of 10 in those conversations, we would have a great conversation about it, and I would feel better. I would be strengthened. I would, gain some encouragement. And a lot of those times you would happen to come along behind that and say you were struggling with something as well. And so we would end up having a really honest conversation that I thought was really much better than just talking about sports or the weather. Yeah. That sort of gets us, as we round toward home, that gets us sort of to some of the things that we can do to maybe deal with dishonesty, if that's a problem that we have, or if we suddenly discover that maybe we're not being as honest with people as we could be. One of those things, as I said earlier, is as soon as we discover that we've been dishonest, we should admit it as soon as possible. Yeah. If you're in a 12-step program, this is the 10th step. The 10th step specifically says that when we are wrong, promptly admit it. And that's whatever the wrong is. I said the wrong thing. I didn't give back that change that you gave me too much. at the cash register. I've walked out of Walmart before and realized that there was something, that I was in the bottom of my buggy that I forgot to pay for. I turn right around and go back in and pay for it. I don't say I'll pick it up next time I'm here or whatever. I just deal with it right then. That is absolutely one of the most powerful policies that I have adopted in my life, is to just not let it linger. Just fix it right then. Deal with it right then. If I say something, and this can be embarrassing, if I'm in a conversation and I embellish something, it's just imperative to me that I stop right then and say, well, wait a minute, let me correct myself. And even if you just admit you just told a lie, it's better to me than not doing so.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
There's an old saying that developing honesty is like building up muscles. The more you do it, the more honest you become.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think you pick a day and you say, from this day forward, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna tell little white lies. I'm not gonna bend the truth or embellish the truth. I'm just gonna let my truth be true. And I'm going to do that with everybody that I meet today, everywhere I go, every letter, every email, every text. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not going to, say anything that I don't know to be 100% true. It does become a habit. And we've talked about how the mind works. You do something over and over again, the mind is going to make it a habit. That's the way our minds are designed to work. Yeah. Keeping a journal. You mentioned a second ago that sometimes, you've got to think about the things you're saying and sort of take stock. Well, one of the best ways to do that is to journal. Men do not nobody, I think, likes to be told to keep a journal. Yeah. But I can tell you from doing it that as much as I do not enjoy it, at the end of the day, to sit down and just write out some thoughts about the day, the things that I felt like I did well, the things that I felt like I fell short on. Yeah. That is one of the best tools I have to force myself to be honest about where I am that day. Because some days I walk in and I'm thinking, today was a good day. Yeah. And then I sit down and I write down some of the things that I did. And I think to myself, you really let that person down in that relationship. You really did say the wrong thing today. And you have no excuse for that other than it was just stupidity or, getting carried away or whatever, wanting to impress, all those things. And that's my chance when I'm looking at it on paper. That's my chance to be honest with myself. I really messed up there. And it might not be that the whole world's going to end because of it, but it does mean that tomorrow morning I can get up and I can try not to do that tomorrow. And that's progress.
I think that goes well with the honesty with yourself. Like the overarching thing for the day, just being honest with yourself about the day. You could have just forgotten about something that your heart rate's elevated or something like that. And then when you take stock of it, and I'm not good at journaling. I don't say I enjoy it, but I've seen the benefits when I do it, because it's something different about just putting your thoughts on paper and even reading them. It's almost like giving feedback to yourself. Mm-hmm. I joke, I say, well, if I need a professional opinion, I'll just ask myself about something and then I'll have a discussion with myself. Mm-hmm. But it really does help you get your thoughts down, and it helps you have to organize your thoughts. And some people say it has to be written. I guess it can be typed. Everybody's got an iPhone, but it helps if you write it down, even if it's just a page. And I love the 3 questions we kind of do sometimes that I've heard for helping to build into me is like, where are you? So just say what's going on right now. I'm stressed out a bit about this at work, whatever. What are you afraid of? I'm afraid that someone will see me as this. I will be perceived as this. I'm afraid I will fail in this way because I'm not sure about it. And then just asking, what do you want? Mm-hmm. That can help clarify a lot of situations. And in a Bible study group, asking those questions, but just asking those 3, where are you? What are you afraid of? And what do you need? And then even the need can help you be honest with yourself about what you do need. Yeah. Because we don't want to say sometimes that I need encouragement. I need connection with something, but sometimes that's what we need. I need to talk to this friend I hadn't talked to in a while. They're always encouraging. I just need to reach out to them. Something as simple as that. But those 3 questions, it doesn't have to be a a novel. But I usually just fill up maybe a page, maybe half a page sometimes, and it
Yeah,
helps
you're
me
right.
so much.
Yeah, it can be a very simple process, and I'm laughing because you, like everybody else I talk to about this, says, "Well, I don't like to journal, and I don't do it very often, but when I do it, it's just great."
I know,
And I keep wondering, why is it that we all admit that it's just great when we do it, but we all admit that we never do it? I do believe that that's probably one of those habits that I need to work on.
Yeah.
That would absolutely not hurt me at all, and would probably do a lot to improve my experience. Because at the end of the day, the goal with honesty is to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this sounds like rocket surgery, doesn't it? But the only way to be honest is to be honest.
Yeah.
To stop lying, to not cheat, to not stretch the truth, to be straightforward and trustworthy with every word that comes out of my mouth. And then in terms of honesty with myself, just to constantly be self-aware, work on developing self-awareness so that I am not living in denial, but I can look in the mirror and I can say, you're not perfect, but you're working on changing things for the better. Mm-hmm. I've enjoyed seeing this in particular in my sons. Both of my sons are young men. They are at that stage in life to where they are learning a lot about how to move from being a child to being a man. And that
sucks.
Well, it does. It can suck, yeah. But the reality is that it's a really cool process as a parent to watch, because they are coming out of childhood and immaturity and moving into maturity. But the way I would define maturity is they are becoming honest with themselves about the need to raise the level, to reach up, to be something better, something more, to rid some things out of their life that are not productive or helpful in the short term or the long term. And I just absolutely, as a dad, there's nothing more fulfilling than to see them learning to mature in that way. And honesty, being honest, is a huge part of that. I'm very proud of my sons. They are both honest men. If you sit down with them, they're going to be a good friend, because they're going to do all those things I've been talking about. They're going to be honest with you about what they see in themselves as flaws, and what they think they can do to help you to address your own shortcomings in a loving, unconditionally loving way. To me, that's a great element of manhood, is to have that quality of being able to see yourself as you really are, to make decisions, to make tough changes that will improve you as a person, and then to help other people to do that in your relationships. So with that, I think we've sort of checked out honesty. Anything else you can think of we haven't said about it?
I think the only thing I'd add is, you said it just a second ago. You said it's sometimes tough when we see our own shortcomings, and sometimes an honest assessment of ourselves reveals some shortcomings, and that can make us not want to be honest with ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think if there's an encouragement there, it's that if you think that there is going to be in your circle, whatever it is, if you think that, I don't know, the fear that I would have would be if they knew that I wasn't as strong as I present myself, they will reject me. They will not want to be friends. They will not want to fill in the blank. Like, if someone sees my shortcomings, so I'm not going to be honest about it. I'm not going to let anybody know about it. Mm-hmm. And so what I thought was either a friendship or a relationship wasn't actually real. Mm-hmm. And so I think it took that learning of, hey, you can be honest about struggles, or you can be honest about yourself without losing everything. Because I think I was afraid of losing things. Mm-hmm. But what was actually true is, like, I actually didn't. It's not really a relationship if it's not honest. It's not really
That's
real.
Right. Yeah,
it's not real if you're being dishonest about whatever it is. And so I think there's such a joy and a freedom when you are honest about what you actually do struggle with, what you're actually going through, rather than just trying to hide it and act like everything's okay, because then it's just a bunch of fake people walking around struggling in silence.
I could not agree more. So that's the last word on honesty. Okay. We appreciate y'all listening to Reaching Up Podcast. Hope you got something out of this episode on honesty. If you're on YouTube, be sure and hit that like button for us. We really appreciate that. Subscribe, tap the bell button. Be sure and get our next episode when it comes out. If you're listening on Spotify, iHeart, or Apple Podcasts, be sure and follow us. Rate us on Spotify if you're willing. Like us on iHeart and leave us a comment on any of those platforms. Check us out on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're in all those places. Numbers are looking good. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have suggestions for us about topics or about things or just questions about things we talk about, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us by email at contact@reachinguppodcast.com or message us on your app that you listen in on. Next episode, we'll be talking about
empathy.
Empathy. All right, empathy. So tune in for that next time around. Thanks for listening.